Good evening. Theo Hensley, MD here, and you're on the Dr. Theo Show. Shout out and welcome to my guest tonight, Dr. Al Claiborne, local veterinarian here in Greeneville. Al, can you tell me a little bit about your background, what you do, what makes you potentially an expert in a different field than what we normally talk about?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on tonight, Dr. Hensley. It's an honor. So I'm Dr. Al Claiborne. I practice veterinary medicine at the Animal Medical Center of Greeneville. I've been there going on 6 years. I actually worked in an emergency practice for a year within those past 6 years. But primarily or solely take care of dogs and cats, so small animals. And as far as how this can relate to COVID, from what we know from research so far, this appears to be a zoonotic disease, which means that it was probably transmitted from an animal to a human, and it's propagated from there. Once it hit the human world, that's where Dr. Hensley's expertise takes hold. But we have seen it in several different species of animals, and it is certainly something to keep an eye on.
Now, Dr. Claiborne, you may not have noticed this, but there's a tiger here behind me. And
Yeah,
the reason for that was one of my interests that actually kind of piqued the reason that I reached out to you was that I'd heard reports back a month or two ago of coronavirus being transmitted at least to cats or big cats. I think if I read correctly, there was a cat at the Bronx Zoo, or a big cat, tiger, I believe, that had shown positive there too. So would love to hear your thoughts on those types of things, and we'll go through a few more questions. So, what have you read so far in your literature as far as animal transmission goes?
Sure thing. So we know that specifically cats, and actually there's reports now coming out of, I believe it was the Netherlands. It was a European country that meat farms have actually been infected with COVID. And so the first reported case in a domestic animal was a dog in Hong Kong. That dog, he had some other underlying health issues, and he did come from a COVID positive household, but it seems like he recovered, and shortly after recovery passed away. So it doesn't seem that was the cause of death for him. The next reported cases in animals were several of the big cats at the Bronx Zoo they were diagnosed as positive COVID cases. I think there were 6 or 8 in total that ended up testing positive. So we know that there was also a house cat in New York that tested positive for coronavirus as well.
Now,
That cat.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So what I'm curious about was, through all this, of course, most of the world's focused on humans and how this is being transmitted. And of course, there's plenty of theories, legitimate and conspiracy, as far as how this gets passed along and so forth. But how would one even know if a cat, whether it be a house cat, large cat, mink, whatever that is, or that dog in Hong Kong? I mean, what kind of symptoms would say, hey, I'm going to get my tiger tested for this? Are they sneezing? Are they having respiratory distress? I mean, why would someone just say, hey, let me swab something?
So that's a good question. The typical sign that we see is respiratory issue, just an acute onset of a cough. If your cat or dog develops an acute cough, it should be evaluated for many other disease processes before going down the route of diagnosing for coronavirus. Transmission from humans to pets is exceedingly rare. So if we think about the sheer number of cases that we've seen in humans across the world. We have less than 100 probably documented cases so far outside of the mink farms of documented cases in pets. So it's increasingly rare, or exceedingly rare. So if your cat or dog develops a cough, chances are it's something else. They still need to be evaluated. So the other interesting side of this is at the mink farms, which they actually believe the coronavirus has been spread from farm to farm by feral cats. That's one suspected route of transmission. The mink were actually experiencing gastrointestinal illness, probably diarrhea or something along those lines, which of course has been reported in humans as well as a result, as a symptom of coronavirus. They seem to experience primarily GI illness followed by respiratory illness, whereas cats and the couple of dogs have been strictly respiratory illness.
See, and that completely fascinates me because there's so much that we don't know on the medical side right now, and just today, the CDC announced that they don't think perhaps that there's as high of transmission rates on inanimate surfaces like desks or chairs or groceries, for example. And so they kind of did throw out pets as being that too, but I'm just not so sure how much really we can say that for sure at this point. Now, of those 100 of cases or so, obviously there's going to be more that you don't diagnose, and we're focused on people right now. So I don't imagine there's a whole lot of testing kits available to animals at that point. But it really caught my attention when you said feral cats as well, because I see feral cats in various neighborhoods on a regular basis in different places that I've lived. In fact, just a few months ago, one visited our house and my wife insisted upon feeding it, which I said, no, that it's going to stay. Luckily, she put out some Facebook posts and found that was actually a house cat that we found that home, because I'm allergic and I don't know, I just don't trust cats, just sitting there all nimbly bimbly and judging you. I trust dogs. I don't know if that's just a human thing or a me thing, but I don't know. I just don't trust these cats, and there's these feral cats everywhere. So right now, and I don't want to scare anybody here in Greeneville, because right now we have 0 active cases of coronavirus. So this isn't hey, you need to go out and get rid of all these feral cats. This is just something I'm wanting people to think about, as maybe round 2 may come here, whether it's a month or 2 from now, or maybe we do all the right things and it's several months from now. But at some point, there's probably going to be more cases that pop up. So I'm at least wanting people to be aware of these types of things as they come out there. Any other transmission symptoms? Of course, I heard you mention respiratory and GI and those types of things. Any other animals? I mean, what we're hearing potentially is this started in a bat, and of course, what I've read, at least medically, from previous SARS and MERS viruses, is that's a common zoonotic or animal origin where this virus naturally is. Is that something that then bats here or other animals in the wild may be passing that on? I mean, is this something we have to worry about with deer or anything else that's out there, or we just don't know at this point?
That's a good question. Historically, this has originated in bats. MERS in, I believe, 2011, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it originated in camels. But typically, the reservoir host is the bat. Now, these coronaviruses, they're harbored in these bat populations, and I've read one article that suggested that just encroachment into the wild habitat of these bats may have brought this about. So there's that environmental factor as well, but the coronavirus settles in these bats, and then just as any virus can do, we get these wild mutations. Bats then they can spread it to other species. I've read that there was a suspicion a few months ago that it may have passed through a civet, which I think is related to the cats. So, that seems to be the reservoir. We've got a mutation that's then gone ahead and hop species. And then we have these other species that have been affected as well. So it does seem like a variant that hops species more easily than it has in the past. And that's the reason I think that we're seeing such widespread disease with it.
And I read the same thing as far as the camel with the MERS, which is the Middle Eastern respiratory virus, very similar to the first SARS virus one back years ago. And so I read the same thing, although it's hard to sometimes know exactly the strain, but I have an idea how this works. But, and if you don't know this, that's okay too. I really don't want to get into speculation here. With so many people saying, hey, this was an intentional type of thing, this is a lab accident or on purpose, and all those things could potentially be plausible of what we don't know from China or whatever else like that. Our current experts, at least from what I've read, they think that the current strain going on based on molecular sequencing is close enough to strains having gone around in the bats that it makes sense that it's mutated or whatnot, become more virulent, and then, like you said, maybe it's spread from the bat to a cat to whatever else. So I think at this point, the fresh market theory, maybe there's something to that. Maybe it's not. Maybe that was a downstream animal passed to. But as opposed to my guest last night, my son Silas, the 6-year-old, he said that this came from someone eating a bat. What do you think about that? Did someone eat a bat and then they get sick and they're patient zero? Or what do you think about that?
At this stage of the game, I think that his idea is just as plausible as every other idea that I've heard. If we want to be real honest about it. Now, the only thing that says I don't completely believe that is that the CD says that if I consume coronavirus on food, that my digestive tract is going to neutralize the virus. So that's the only thing to me saying that that's the only flaw in Silas's theory, but it's still as plausible as any other theory we have so far.
So follow-up question. So if you're saying that's plausible, and plausible for anyone listening doesn't mean it's true. It means there's a small chance it could be true. So if eating a bat is a plausible situation, where is Ozzy Osbourne and how do we fix this?
That's a good question. We need to ask Silas.
Okay. All right. I'll see what I can do when I can have him back on my show. Getting back to other news, things that I'm looking at right now, I'm working with a group that you're part of with Greene County professionals and business people and whatever else. And once again, appreciate your input in that group. We've been drafting guidelines of people of how to go out, which we do need to revise and go over those types of things as this new information and new cases have changed here. With that said, what I'm trying to wrap my brain around is I need to give advice to the town, to the community of how to do things through the summer. So right now, people are planning on vacations. People are planning on cookouts. At least I know I am. We've got Memorial Day coming up, right? And what's more American than honoring people that have died for our freedom by cooking meat on a grill and other adult beverages or activities or things like that, right? So let's say I were having people over to my house and we were trying to be distant, staying 6 or 10 feet apart. And I'm doing everything that I can to be smart and washing hands. I could even go extreme this point and ask friends or family, to wear a mask or things like that. But I have 2 adorable little wiener dog puppies. And
yes, you do.
And I've showed you a picture of these too, and I put them on my page as well. And holy cow, that just melts your heart. And there's not a person that's come over to my house that hasn't been, ooh, let me touch, let me cuddle, and they're petting my dog. And one of the questions, at least that my wife and I had, were, okay, do we need to wash the dog now, or depending on that person, maybe they're higher risk of exposure because they shop at Walmart or something like that. I mean, what do we know about pets, and what should we do with those pets if people are coming over to our house? Because, like I said, don't plan on being anywhere near directly certain people. But if I'm cuddling with an animal, they're cuddling with an animal, whether that's a cat or dog. Once again, don't trust cats, but the good animals, the dogs. What do we do with that?
At this stage of the game, and you mentioned this earlier, we don't have any evidence that transmission can occur via the dog as a fomite. And a fomite is any intermediate object that can kind of harbor a bacteria or a virus and then spread it onto the next person that comes in contact with it.
Now,
so
you said something there that I've heard a lot and that I've said on my show a lot. We don't have any current evidence. So
right.
What that means is it's possible. It just, maybe we haven't seen enough cases. Maybe it's not studied. What do you think the meat and the potatoes of this are? What do you think actually matters through that, though? Because obviously, if that dog has a cough and they don't normally have allergies this time of year or something else like that, then if they're infected and we just didn't know it, or maybe they're asymptomatic carriers or whatever else like that, if they're coughing, I would think that would be maybe higher risk.
Yes, I agree that that's definitely a higher risk because and it all has to do, of course, with the timeline of when the person coughs that respiratory droplet onto the pet, and then someone else comes along and pets it, and then especially if you have kids around, they're gonna pet the dog and they're gonna stick their finger right in their nose. I mean, let's just be honest of what they do.
And that's, I guess, what I'm thinking about here. We've got 3 young children. We have friends and families with multiple young children. I could see your 2 kids coming over to my house sometime and spreading their boogers around my dogs or kids or whatever else like that too. And that's how we see, flu and that kind of stuff going around, right? These kids get together, they're playing. Of course, at that point, if the kid's symptomatic, they're probably going to catch it from the other kid from the respiratory type of stage. So that's probably lower risk at that point, I guess, unless it's that scenario where I mentioned where people are specifically staying apart, maybe outside or something, but then the dog may catch it or the cat may catch it or something else like that. So it doesn't sound like to me that that's probably our highest concern right now.
No, I think if someone is either asymptomatic or symptomatic, either way, at least from what I've heard from you and what I've read in other literature, if that person is going to cough on the dog, they're also probably coughing elsewhere for other people to inhale those droplets. Okay. So I think the highest yield or highest efficiency is to, it may be worth it to, if it's someone from outside your immediate peer group or family, maybe wear masks while you're around each other, since that does dramatically.
The dog should wear a mask, or I should wear the mask?
The dog should not. The dog should wear the mask. You should not. That's what we're. No, I'm just kidding.
But a dog keeping a mask on,
I think we should sell these because they're going to chew them up right away, and it'd be the perfect sales pitch.
Now we're talking. Now we've got it, and we could put some kind of essential oil in there or something else.
Yes.
Maybe some vitamin C, some kind of an orange citrus scent. I like where this is going. Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit better about that. I guess if I was just really worried about it, okay, dog maybe needs a bath anyways at some point. So if other people are going to pet it, maybe I go ahead and wash at that point. That's probably overkill, but maybe not hurt.
Yeah, it probably is overkill. And also the other thing is, if we look at how long does an average barbecue last, we're probably looking at 4 to 6 hours. And by the time the virus sets on the pet's fur for 4 to 6 hours, it's probably been dehydrated or desiccated at that point. And from what I've read anyway, once the virus is dehydrated, it's basically not infectious anymore. And you can correct me on that. But if you can correct me if that's wrong, but
because I've read some different things with that on different surfaces, and that's ever changing. One of the initial studies said that after the Diamond Princess cruise members had left the ship in Japan or whatnot, after they'd been quarantined on the ship for a while, that even 17 days later, there was still active virus on certain surfaces. Now, that maybe that's not enough to be infectious at that point. I'm not sure. Some of the previous information was maybe up to 3 days on hard, non-porous type surfaces, softer surfaces, less than that. So either way, that sounds pretty low yield. So I really shouldn't worry about when people come over, other than just the people coming over and the human interaction there. I guess, of course, my dogs don't roam around, but if there was maybe a feral cat and they chased it around, that potentially could have some risk if they're running wild, or maybe playing with other neighbor dogs or something like that. That I could see, but then you really wouldn't know that, and you wouldn't be able to tell that until they had a cough. So that sounds pretty low yield. Here's another question for you, and this is a question I'm getting from people that have had the virus outside of town, and I've talked to them, or people that are being swabbed locally at the health department, people that are coming from out of town thinking about, hey, I need to quarantine myself because I've been in a hot spot and I'm going to isolate myself to one part of the house and things like that. One thing that I've thought about is, okay, let's say someone in the household gets diagnosed with coronavirus, and it just so happens they have pets, right? I mean, if you're going out of your room and going to a bathroom and there's not a different floor that you could isolate, and eventually you got to eat or whatever else like that,
Right.
I could see it being very difficult to keep, a dog out of your bedroom or out of your part of the house or whatever else like that. Cats, once again, they don't care about you. They don't miss you when you're gone. They just, you can be gone a week and come back home and they just look at you like, oh, you're back. Oh, great. Feed me. That dog, you're gone 30 minutes and it's, I never thought you'd come back. They just love you, right? So how in the world,
Right.
would you keep potentially pets away from you? Because I guess the goal at that point would be, if I'm sick, I don't want to pet on the dog and then they go hang around my kids who have asthma. Any thoughts on that?
So again, I think it's kind of the same situation. The most likely spread is going to be human-to-human interaction. Now, this is according to CDC and according to the AVMA, or American Veterinary Medical Association. If you've been diagnosed with coronavirus, do distance yourself from your pet, because we do have documented cases of infection. Most of these infections, a vast majority, came from interaction with a COVID positive human.
Sure.
So there is a chance of infection. Now, mortality in pets is at this stage, from what we know, is 0%. So you don't have to worry about mortality necessarily.
Although I would argue if you only have 100 confirmed cases, it may be a little hard to know that.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that completely. We just don't have any documented deaths. So I would say, you need to work on distancing yourself from other humans primarily. Still distance yourself from your pets as well. And the other side of that is, of course, if you're the only person in the house and you have a pet that's there, if at all possible, make arrangements to have that pet cared for outside the house. Because if someone else is having to continually come in, and of course, if you have a dog, you want to walk it at least 2 to 4 times a day so it can go use the bathroom and whatnot. You got to feed and water it and everything. If you have humans coming in, that's potentially exposing them to coronavirus at that point. So, if you have someone close by, a friend, neighbor, family member, or whatnot, and you are diagnosed with coronavirus, it is recommended that you make accommodations to have that pet cared for outside the house, just to limit that human-to-human spread.
Now, I was listening to a news station back a few weeks ago on my way to work, and they had a veterinarian at least on. I was listening on the radio through it, and they talked about if you're in a situation like that where you have that known exposure and there is a need to send a pet away or anything else like that, how to clean that pet. And what that vet suggested actually was just dishwasher soap, I guess like a dial or a real thick, potent, concentrated type dish soap, for example, nothing scented or antibacterial or those types of things, but I guess just the surfactant to be able to surround any other living tissue was really high yield. So I would think at that point, if I was an outside person that said, hey, my family member's sick, they're not going to be able to take care of the pet during this time. They're too sick or too short of breath or whatever else to go walk the dog. But they're not sick enough to be in the hospital, or maybe they are sick in the hospital and you've got to go pick up that animal to take care of them while they're in the hospital. Thorough bath at that point, or what kind of precautions should you take when bathing an animal like that?
Yeah, so no serious precautions. In that case, it probably would be a good idea to, as you're handling the pet before you give it a bath, wear a pair of gloves. Because of course that is to limit cross-contamination. Now, don't keep those gloves on for the next 3 days when you go to the grocery store and Walmart and whatnot. But it would be advisable to wear some gloves while you're handling that pet, just in case there are some infective respiratory droplets. And the best, not a routine shampoo, but in this instance, is Dawn dishwashing detergent. Like you mentioned, not scented, nothing special about it, just the basic plain Dawn dishwashing detergent. I know we've all seen the commercials of Dawn being used to rinse off the birds that are affected by oil spills and whatnot. It is extremely safe to use, so use that. It is going to go ahead and it's going to, like you said, the surfactant is going to clean all those surfaces off, rinse away any viral particles. The other thing to keep in mind is, especially with dogs, they're going to have leashes. And so the handles on those leashes potentially could be infectious if there's viral particles on those. If it's a cat, they probably have some type of plastic carrier or box or something. Go ahead and use an adequate disinfectant to clean those off before you handle those with that pet. So use any type of disinfectant that's labeled to kill coronavirus. To make sure that those are not going to cross-contaminate and contaminate you while you're in the process of taking care of that pet.
Okay, so basically you're saying, let's say I have a loved one that goes to the hospital, I've got to take care of Fido, and I'm going to spray some Lysol, maybe a hydrogen peroxide solution, a bleach solution, let it sit there maybe 60 seconds or longer to be able to kill off whatever's there. In the meantime, washing your hands at that point. I wouldn't think you would have to wear a mask around that unless you just were trying to prevent yourself from touching your face, because really that would be the only risk there is if animals been in contact and then animals sick or something like that. Of course, that's a completely different story, because then you're exposed just from the animal coughing or whatnot. But I guess I'm thinking, if that patient or that family member is sick and they're coughing on that leash or coughing on those things, once again, this is all pretty low yield, but this is just an idea for right now where we don't have those studies. Like you mentioned, we don't have that information. So we're relying on experts that know more than I do about this type of thing to kind of guide us through. So I appreciate that insight. Now, last question I have for you before we can open it up and see if you have any other thoughts is, you mentioned, no confirmed deaths from this. And I quipped back with oh yeah, but you only have 100 cases and testing all these things. Yeah, I'm always the, oh, but what if person, because I like to think about those things. But, what happens when you have a pet that dies from a potentially infectious disease? I mean, I hear about things like parvovirus frequently when I bring my pets into you to get updated on vaccinations, or if we're boarding or those types of things. Is there any reporting mechanism traditionally, or any new things that are coming down from the Veterinary Association so that, hey, if you have a confirmed case, suspicious case, who to report it to? I mean, is there any new processes or things that your organizations are doing that's different?
Good question. So there's actually a published protocol or kind of a step-by-step process on whether to test a patient for coronavirus or not. And it gets to be pretty detailed. I won't bore everyone with those details. But it basically, like we mentioned earlier, it basically recommends to screen out the more likely causes of acute respiratory illness in dogs and cats. So if we get to the point that we're suspecting a coronavirus infection in a dog or a cat, then we can actually contact the state veterinarian and the state veterinarian's office to get further guidance and their direction on how to go about diagnosing, confirming the diagnosis of coronavirus. And then from there, they're going to track that pet. They're going to track that case from there on out. And we're going to go by their recommendations and their guidelines based on that. Beyond that, I don't have any experience with that. I haven't personally seen a coronavirus case just yet, but that is who I would defer to if we saw a likely source, a pet that's been in contact, likely infected. I would contact them and then follow their direction in diagnosing, treating, and then if the pet were to pass away, it probably would be transported to a pathologist for the equivalent of a autopsy in animals called a necropsy for further confirmation of death.
Very, very interesting. You see it.
Further confirmation of cause of death.
Okay, now I got you. So in humans, at least initially, that was kind of a similar type of a pattern or diagnosis. We had such few tests 2 months ago that we had to screen for strep, we had to screen for flu because we already have those tests. And typically, you'd find a strep or flu, then you would stop screening and you would just treat for that. Now, I've heard directly from certain physicians in the front lines in Louisiana and New York that have said that once they started expanding their testing capabilities, they would get someone that was flu positive, but there were a certain percentage, even though small, that had both flu and coronavirus. And so, if there's just a few of that, then we know it's possible to have more than one. So if you get any more information on that over time, or protocols change, or you start seeing other reports, absolutely reach out to me so I can update our viewers here. Because right now, I think we've covered some high yield things. Once again, not to scare anybody, this is just some general information. And just like I've said with medicine, this could change too. And as things change, we'll try to update you. As of right now, it's wash your hands and wear a mask and cover your mouth when you're coughing. Now we can add, if your dog coughs consistently, not just maybe once getting choked on food or something like that, but if your dog's coughing, that's not normal, and that there can be other serious things that can be due to that. Most likely more other types of things as opposed to something like coronavirus. But we at least need to be aware that these types of things live in nature. And like you mentioned, most likely this came from a bat in China, and between humans exploring those caves, or whether it's doing research or not, I see you on top of a mountain right now, for example. So in theory, there could be someone in China like you that's just saying, hey, I want to get out and go on a hike. Hey, I want to go spelunking or cave diving or whatever else like that. So with 7.5 billion people in the world, we are interacting with nature. We are disrupting environments and habitats and those types of things. We're exposing us to animals, and then animals are being exposed to us at a rate unprecedented from the previous history. So a lot of those things that we just don't know, but that was at least my thought and my concern is, hey, if this started in animals and came to humans, and here we've got a human outbreak, what's stopping that from going back to animals, and then as we interact with those animals? So yeah, right now, that's way down on the totem pole. much higher risk of being in Walmart and someone coughing on you, or in a closed-spaced restaurant, or what I worry about when we go back to church, when we're singing hymns and we're spraying spit on each other, what kind of masks we're going to have to wear to do those types of things, or other close gatherings there. So by far, we know some really high yield things, but I don't want to forget and at least be aware and prepared for the lower yield things. Any final thoughts or recommendations as far as preventative care for vets, how people are going to the vet? I know when I brought an animal to you back 2 months ago when this all started, you came out completely gowned up with a protective mask, far better than anything I had in medicine, and that you guys shut down your waiting room to help out with this. What's going on now? What's the process? And what are you guys doing to not only protect your patients, as you call them, or as I call them, pets or animals, but from that perspective, your patients, but also their owners, the humans. What are you guys doing right now and planning on doing kind of going forward as things are changing and new information's out?
So excellent question. So for the past 2 months now, we have been exclusively curbside service. So outside of if we have a hospitalized patient that the owner wants to visit with, or in the unfortunate circumstance that we have to perform a euthanasia on a pet, those clients were allowed into an exam room that was cleaned immediately before and immediately after they were in that room. Thoroughly cleaned, and employees are in masks, and those clients were asked to be in masks as well. Aside from those two situations, our process has been for clients to wait in the parking lot. We had a staff member go out in protective equipment to go out and pick up that pet, cat or dog, whichever it may be. They would bring them inside. The doctors would assess what's going on, call that client on the phone to provide recommendations for diagnosis or treatment, or just to discuss the case overall, just as carry on that same conversation that we would have in the exam room. And then once everything was completed, we would take the pet back out to the vehicle and actually I'd say we process probably 90% of payments over the phone now. So that it really does a number of things. It protects our staff, because if one of us were to become infected, we're in a close environment, and yes, we are wearing masks most of the time. There are situations where someone takes one off or whatever.
Got to eat sometime,
Yeah, we have to remind each other to put those back on. But if one of us were to be infected, based on the current R values, a number of us will be infected. Which is going to stop our ability to care for our patients. It's going to put all of us at risk, and it's going to make a lot of people sick. And then on the other side of that, it protects our clients. A good number of our clients are in the age brackets that seem to have higher hospitalization and mortality rates, so we need to protect them as well. So that was our goal with that, and we've been I'd have to say our staff has performed really well with that complete change of process and workflow. And our clients have been exceedingly grateful and gracious, because our wait times, I'm sure, have elevated a little bit just because we have more steps in the process. But I've got to compliment everybody that's been involved. So those are the steps that we took, that we've taken in the last 2 months. Now,
that's not all the steps. I mean, there's finite details that I've heard you talk about that I know that my office is doing in human medicine, even to the extent of giving away the pen or sanitizing the pen that you have someone sign something for. I mean, so this is kind of the level that our local leaders and business people either are or should be doing right now for a few reasons. Now, you mentioned not only protecting the customer and the pet and your staff, but also the community in general, and that made me think, when we're looking at cases widespread right now, I heard a report, I think it was in Arkansas or Iowa here today, where a large percent of their confirmed coronavirus patients were either A, in a nursing home, or B, working in a meat processing factory. Now, here's kind of what the curious thing was for me. I mean, we have plenty of people that work, in Amazon or other distribution centers for Walmart, and there are cases in all of those where one or two people maybe got sick or multiple, and then they had to shut something down. But when we're looking at it, there's right now a meat shortage in this country, not because of a farming situation, because of a processing plant. Any ideas about why a meat processing plant of processing cows and chickens, that why these workers are getting sick? Because I mean, here we're talking about animals. I guess this is a morbid turn in the conversation. If we've talked about protecting animals, now I've brought up eating animals, and I'm so sorry if that's offensive. This just kind of hit me and said, hey, wow, maybe there's a connection between this animal stuff. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a coincidence. Any thoughts there between what I guess cows and pigs and chickens?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you on why this is affecting meat processing plants. I wonder if there's an element of media and politics that plays a role in this. Why are they only targeting food supply? And I don't want to get into the politics of this at all, because I think this is real. It's a very valid concern. I don't want to give any conspiracy theories any type of foothold in this conversation.
Well, and I wasn't going towards conspiracy theory down that rabbit hole, because most conspiracies just plain aren't true.
Right.
I guess what I was getting at is, once again, here's this virus that came from an animal to a human, and now we're seeing a surprising amount of people, even if they're asymptomatic. I mean, there's companies that are testing all their employees now at meat processing plants, and a lot of them are turning up positive, but just not having any symptoms. Have you read or heard about anything like that?
I've read that. I've read of a number of situations where a number of people in a food processing plant were they were tested and were positive but were asymptomatic. So I don't know. I don't have any scientific basis. I don't have an answer for why that's the case. We don't. I mean, I can't think of any plausible reason that meat processing plants should be affected. And to me, if anything, they should be at lower risk because most, I would anticipate at least a number of those people are wearing some type of protective equipment and mask and whatnot, which from what we know right now should decrease the spread of this. So that's one thing that I found curious over the past couple of weeks, that there have been so many meat processing plants hit.
And to be fair, there are other factories and businesses and everything else being hit by this. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was interesting that a large part of a few states that aren't New York City, for example, or the state of New York, these are the more rural areas, and there's just these clusters that are popping up in small areas. And, it could be something as simple as those are essential workers, and, they had to work during something like that. And so, maybe just being in close contact during a time, and that's we've heard reports of truckers, going across the country. So that could be a way if you went from somewhere like New York to deliver food, and then you're going back to the processing plant and going back. So there could be a link kind of there. I really don't suspect there's going to be anything as far as, like I said, chicken and beef and pork goes. I just found that to be an interesting connection, because I would think that, well, it's all speculation at that point, really else, but it's interesting. So tell you what, if you read any more or find out any more information or any other not conspiracy theories, because I agree with you that we don't need to be spreading garbage on my show, but I still would like to stimulate thought, right? Because every time I talk with somebody smart, I throw out an idea, I throw out something to think about, and then your wheels turn. So, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. Let me research that. Let me get back. And whenever we get a bunch of us together, like in our task force, then the final product we come up with, the final recommendation, the final way we look at this is really changed. So I greatly appreciate your input, Dr. Claiborne. And just to throw out a plug there for anyone here in town, I've talked about Walmart a few times, but your office is actually right behind Walmart. And of course, I can speak from personal experience from knowing you most of your life. In fact, competing and sometimes beating your baseball teams when we were children, and all kinds of other kind of things. That I've known you for a really long time. You're a really smart guy. You're funny. I go to church with you. I respect you, but you're a very good veterinarian. And so I do highly recommend you and your office, both in general care, your compassion for animals, and for anyone out there that, of course, knows our recent story with one of the loss of our wiener dogs back a few months ago. So once again, appreciate everything you do. Appreciate your time here on the show. And once again, please reach out to me for any other information, as we know, because by September, October, if this is coming back around, these are the kind of things we need to be kicking around because the government's role is big picture stuff, the social distancing and the isolation. But it's up to us, the citizens, and those of us that have skills in these particular fields in medicine, in veterinary medicine, in dentistry, pharmacy, business, to be able to put our brains together and solve these difficult problems to save as many lives as we can. But also, more importantly than that, is adapting our business models to protect people and to protect our staff. Because if it's that easy for a meat processing plant in Middle Tennessee or wherever that was to get infected, very well, it could be a veterinarian office or a restaurant or something else like that, where one person's sick and then infects a lot. So that's why we're reaching out there. We want to keep these cases at zero as long as possible. And then when there is that one, then do the contact tracing and do the research and figure out how to isolate and minimize impact. Any final thoughts, Dr. Claiborne?
I just want to say thank you for having me on. I do want to revisit one topic earlier in the show, and that was the feral cat issue. Okay. So we believe, like we talked about the mink farms in Europe, that potentially they believe cats could be transmitting that back and forth. I want to put everyone's mind at ease that cats have not been documented to spread this to humans. So do not be afraid of your feral cats, except for you, Dr. Hensley. You can remain afraid of cats. That's totally fine. Yeah, just like him.
I'm almost just as afraid of Joe Exotic here as the tiger. So that's behind me looking like that. So
yeah. But I don't want to raise any alarm at all about the feral cat colonies as far as harboring this or spreading it to humans or anything like that. Just as I was thinking about that, I thought that it could put a little bit of fear in people's minds, which is not what we want to do. Do not be fearful of the feral cat colonies. Rabies virus is going to be the much more pressing issue in feral cat colonies as opposed to coronavirus. So, and still don't be afraid of that. Just keep your distance from the feral cats. But that was just one thing I wanted to clear up and make sure that we didn't set up any fearful attitudes towards feral cats. Okay. But again, I certainly appreciate you having me on. As you mentioned, we've known each other for quite a while. You all did beat us a number of times in Little League baseball, fairly or unfairly. I don't think we've quite come to an agreement on that.
Record's a record.
Record's a record. I agree. But it's been fun to grow up together, and I'll certainly vouch for Dr. Hensley as well. In being scientifically based, and that's what I look for in any type of medical or professional setting. He does a great job. I trust him with myself and my kids. So I appreciate all the hard work you've put into working for the community over the past couple of months, seeing this as a potentially very serious issue for our community, and getting information out there. And I think getting that information out there has, I know we only had, I think 44 confirmed cases, but if this information hadn't been out there and people heeding some of this advice, we could have had way more cases than what we currently have. So thank you for all the effort, all the time you've put into educating people, making them aware of what's going on, and giving them real world solutions to keep themselves healthy and their friends and family healthy as well.
Very good. Well, there you have it, folks. And final question, and we're signing off for the night. And don't mean to put you on the spot here, but this may be the most important thing that we've talked about the entire night.
All right.
Do you think Carol Baskin fed her previous husband to her pet tigers?
I have not finished the series yet. I cannot comment. We'll leave that for the next episode. To be continued.
To be continued. You heard it, folks. All right. You've tuned into the Dr. Hensley Show. Like, share. If you think there's something high yield, comment, and I can get in touch with Dr. Claiborne or other experts, and we can go from there. You all have a good night.